welcome to episode 12 of the Bithell Games Podcast. I'm Alexander Slawinski.
I'm Mike Bithell.
Each week we talk games, what it's like to make games, and the random stuff we don't generally find time to talk about because we are playing and or making games. We also try to have guests regularly on the show, and this week we've got Andrew John Smith of Spilt Milk Studios. They launched a top-down cooperative shooter called Tango Fiesta late last year. Say hello, Smithy.
Hello, Smithy.
Hey!
How many times has that joke been done?
It's. I think it's happened 2 or 3 times, mainly because of me. I tend to do it. I love that joke. That's a solid joke.
So some quick show notes. Thank you to everyone telling their friends about this show. Every episode has done better than the week before, and our GDC episodes brought in lots of new friends. You all seem to respond well to our lawyer, Mr. Jazz Purewall, being on the show, and so we will be bringing him back in the future. We also announced during GDC that Volume will be released on Vita as a box title through Limited Run Games. We're still working through precise dates and details, and we'll be sure to share as soon as we know. Ordering will be available for that. So let's kick things off with what are you playing? Smithy, what are you playing?
Oh boy, what am I playing? Playing at this profession. I've been playing Command and Conquer, the original.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, every sort of 6 months, it seems cyclical, I get this whole hankering to play Command and Conquer, and I think it's something to do with the fact that I just love cheesy, bad cutscenes. I love naff 90s video game music, and Command and Conquer's like the summit of those two things combined. But yeah, there was like a deal on Amazon for the 17 game pack. You can buy the download code and get like all of them via Origin, and yeah, it's as bad/good as I remember. I'm loving it.
That's so cool. I remember I got like back in the day like a massive, like it was like a folio of all the CD-ROMs. It was every game up to Red Alert 2, I think, and just played them like back to back. Like, oh, I love Command & Conquer.
I can't wait to do exactly that. I mean, there's something. So I'm like you guys probably know, but I'm a real sort of Nintendo console kind of gamer, you know. But there's something about the RTS that really tickles my fancy. Company of Heroes is a particular favourite. I've always enjoyed StarCraft. Never really multiplayer, any of them, but the single player stuff. And yeah, Command & Conquer is kind of where that began for me. So yeah, it's been nice.
The game I want to go back to at some point, if ever I'm able, is Mech Commander. I'd love to do a Mech Commander game. Like, it wasn't technically an RTS, it was more of a squad-based game that looked like an RTS. But yeah, I love the simplicity of those games and but also the complexity that comes out. Really nice.
So are you down with Harebrained Schemes' mech game? The one that they...
I think they're very good at doing the Kickstarters, aren't they? Fair play. Like, they know how to talk to the audience. I'll play it, yeah.
That's an official... Is it an official MechWarrior one?
I think it is, yeah. They got the rights, yeah.
That's pretty cool, yeah. They seem like a solid bunch, you know. Was it Shadow?
They are a solid bunch. They have figured out how to work the Kickstarter cycle and deliver. Period. Like, full stop.
Fair play.
Mike, what have you been playing?
I've not been playing anything because I've been I'm sure we'll talk about this later in studio happenings, but I've been quite busy. So when I'm working on dev, I don't tend to play games like when I'm working really busy on dev. I have been watching Daredevil though. I want to expand the depth of this. I'm about halfway through, and I'm going to avoid spoilers. But yeah, it's interesting. It's not as good as Jessica Jones. That's its main sin. Like, I love the first series, but then I think Jessica Jones just was amazing, and this one kind of feels a bit pedestrian, a little bit safe. But yeah, so I'm enjoying that. That's good. But I'm looking forward to seeing. I've reached the point where I'm not going to say any details, but there's a point in it where you think, oh, they've run out of ideas for that story, so they're going to go and do this thing. Okay, fair enough. So I'm at that point where and now it's starting to coalesce into something, I hope, more together. So it's interesting. It's weird seeing, characters I loved as a kid now like starring in big budget TV shows. That's cool. I was a big Daredevil fan as a kid. Because of the Ben Affleck movie, weirdly, which was
not
a popular perspective on the playground. I loved that movie. As a kid, I loved that movie. And the special edition was awesome. But yeah, so it's nice to see Daredevil back again and better.
Yeah, I've been watching it as well, and the Punisher is my all-time favourite comic book character, I think.
I love the guy playing him is doing a great job, right?
So good, so good. I just hope that... Well, basically, I'm hoping that at the least we'll get him cameoing in all of the series, because that's kind of how most people know him, even in the comics.
He pops in for a bit and then leaves, right?
Yeah,
he could be the next Rosario Dawson, right? She pops up in all the Netflix shows, and it's kind of like...
Yeah,
it'd
exactly.
be cool to see him do the same thing.
I've been playing The Division.
Okay, tell us about The Division. Bring it back to games, Alexander. Bring it back to games.
Send Mike show note. It's called What Are You Playing, not What Are You Watching.
I watch Netflix on my PlayStation. Does that not count?
Oh, we're going to get semantic now.
So tell us all about The Division, how amazing it is and how it's taken over your life, Alexander.
It is amazing, and it's taken over my life. If you have friends, play with friends. That is all. And then go back and play it on hard. And get that loot loop going. Shoot them fools, get that loot. Keep doing that over and over.
Does it stay interesting? That's always my fear with these kind of games. Are you, because you've been playing it for hours and hours and hours, playing with friends, I maintain that no co-op game has ever not been fun just because it's fun to play with your friends.
I mean, that is definitely your sort of flag in the ground on this. Is like, and I've heard you say it multiple times that co-op games are not unfun.
I think because your friends, like, I think you just like hanging out with your friends, right? I do. So like I'll play the worst game in the world. If it's got co-op and I can speak to my friends while playing, I'll have a good time because they're my friends. But do you think Division transcends that? Like, is Division a game that, you know, does it, because that's the thing, I look at the Division, I'm like, yeah, I'd enjoy that for a couple of hours, maybe a 10-hour campaign, but it doesn't seem to have the variety that would make me want to play it for the extended periods. Am I wrong, is basically my question. Am I wrong?
I don't know, because I only play it with friends.
Okay.
I can't answer the question because I've only played it with my friends.
But the things you enjoy about it, when you're thinking about things you enjoyed about it, is it like your buddy did that funny thing or that interesting thing, or is it the game offers interesting possibilities and has tight mechanics and does interesting stuff?
I mean, to me, it's freedom fighters. I just don't have to control the other characters. Yeah.
Nice. Okay. See that you keep saying freedom fighters, and that keeps making me want to go out and buy it because I love freedom fighters. It
is the game mechanics of freedom fighters. Just your friends are the other two characters that you would have controlled back in the day.
Smithy, should we get into this?
We might have to. Yeah. I'm a big Destiny fan, and a lot of people have been saying that this is like a step up from that. I managed to play the beta or solo for like an hour, but even then, the core mechanics, the shooting and the cover particularly, is really, really well done.
Oh God, I'm gonna have to play it, and then at the point where Alexander stops talking about it on this podcast, I'm gonna be really excited about it, and our audience, it's gonna become the Division fan podcast. That's what this is gonna become.
So, Smithy, the reason we decided to have you on the show this week is over the past couple episodes, we'd been talking about GDC and what happens at GDC and what we'd been doing at GDC. And we had Mike Futter from Game Informer on the show talking about the news. And then we were talking about how we were just having various meetings with various people and how that was going. But you were at GDC for something a little bit more specific. You were actually doing the rounds of pitching. Can you talk a little bit about what that's like?
Sure thing, yeah. So, I mean, for the context, we'd been developing a game for about 8 weeks. I should say prototype, not a game. We're pitching to make it into a game. Yeah, and essentially, we about 2.5 months before GDC started, I, emailed everyone I knew in the industry to try and, get meetings sort of set up. I realise it's an incredibly busy time for everyone, so you try and get in there early. And yeah, the idea was that every day we would go to like 4 or 5 different companies. Some were publishers, some were investors, some were just interested parties. A particular concern for us was making contacts over in the US because we don't have many. And yeah, show them what we're working on. It was slightly unusual because we weren't ready to say, right, this is it. Give us some money. Here's how much we'll wait for your call. It was more, we've got another fortnight when we get back, and here's what we've done in this time, and here's a rough idea, but we'll collate, solidify that before getting back to you. But would you like to hear more? Is this interesting? What questions does it raise as you see us playing it? And it was tremendously useful, absolutely fantastic. I think we had 22 meetings booked in, and then I think we had 20 of those planned ones, and then I think we had one extra out of nowhere, which was nice.
And did you find it easier? So you have Tango Fiesta and it's out there. So you have proven that you can actually launch a title, which is a big deal.
Yeah.
Like, at least that shows you can show up at the table. Did you find that made things easier, or did it feel like you're starting from scratch? Like it is a new thing. You are starting from scratch every time.
It was surprisingly important that we had Tango Fiesta under our belt. Some of the team is the same, some of it isn't. Between projects, they're very different projects, like you say. The Tango Fiesta top-down shooter, co-op, 4 players. This is a first-person sort of creepy atmospheric action game. So really, really, really different. And I actually went out there wondering how much that would count against it. People saying, well, the thing you've shipped is nothing like this. The challenges are so different. But then also, some concerns over the fact that Tango Fiesta didn't sell particularly well. It trundles along, but it didn't have, a great launch. It's had some decent reviews, some not so decent, so it was a concern that we hadn't got something that was a calling card as such, but turns out that didn't actually matter. I'm sure people would maybe would have had more meetings with new people than we had. A lot of the meetings we did have were sort of friends of friends or whatever. If we'd had a breakout success, but yeah, it was just, hey, you shipped a game as a team. That's incredibly hard, and well done, and let's see what you got next. So,
do you feel like that's what got you in the door? Was just that you've shipped something?
I think it was that, and a combination in combination with the fact that I've been doing this for professionally over a decade in various different companies. I've always tried to stay in touch with people, be friendly, affable, helpful, professional, and so I would say probably half of the people that I reached out to I hadn't seen or spoken to in this way, as a pitch at all, and half of them were people I was sort of referred to or introduced to once I'd reached out to sort of my network. So that's like something that it's really hard. You can't really learn that. That literally just has to come through attending events, being known, and not being too much of an arse to people.
I think that's something that often gets overlooked. I've known Smithy. I mean, we're mates, but I've known you since when did we meet? I think I was like a junior at Blitz when we met. Like, hadn't shipped anything of my own, had barely shipped anything for anyone else.
Yeah.
And just at that very early stage, I remember chatting with you, and yeah, you have a reputation for being very friendly, very affable, very helpful, very nice. And I think that people often kind of overlook that. They think, well, if I can be an arse as long as I make good games. And it's actually, I think, so much more important, the kind of your reputation in the industry and the kind of the how many bridges you've burnt over the years is such a massive factor.
Yeah,
and I think it's something you're very good at, is kind of maintaining a good reputation, which is tricky. But it's something that I would never underestimate how important that is, and I think people often do.
Absolutely, and it's the kind of thing that's, I guess, frustratingly for some people, it only comes with time. Like, you can't force these relationships, it's just a peculiar thing.
What was a challenge that you had going through the pitch process at GDC that you course corrected really early because you were 2 meetings in or 3 meetings in and something just wasn't working, or you realized, this isn't resonating at all with the folks we're talking to?
Should I be really big-headed and say there wasn't anything? That would be a complete lie. So
it's perfect. He's genius. Yeah.
Everybody loves us. I think what happened is, one of my main concerns, as I mentioned, was that this is a different game for us, and a small team making 8 weeks of progress from scratch on a first person anything is a challenge. So trying to go into it to compensate for that, we'd kind of prepared quite a formal pitch, and I think that quite quickly that didn't really sit very well with how we felt about the game and how we wanted to talk about it to people. There were still a couple of questions about not core mechanics, but just implementation of them, the meta game, that sort of thing, sessioning, etc. But yeah, so like initially the first few were probably a little bit dry, a bit staid. We had PowerPoint slides and all that kind of stuff, and eventually by like the afternoon of the first day, I'd done it enough that I could just reel off all the information from my head, and I'd just sort of talk about, I'd show some nice art on my iPad, and Andrew Roper would be playing through it, and we'd sort of like combine the two, and it just became a much more fluid thing. And I think that helped our sort of secondary objective, which was to get some really good feedback. The people that we were talking to have a lot of experience, they know the market, they know stuff we don't. So by the end of it, we had a whole bunch of stuff from every different meeting that actually added up into 2 or 3 things we should probably try and address in the next 2 weeks before we sort of get back in touch with a playable build that they can go and have a play within their own time.
Did you find yourself pivoting based on who you were talking to? So for example, and I'm not saying you had these meetings, I'm just using it as an example, that if I'm talking to someone like Devolver, it's a very different presentation than when I'm talking to someone like Paradox. So did you feel that you needed to change your presentation based on who you were talking to, or did you kind of still have the same beats through the presentation each time?
We pretty much had the same beats. I mean, it would often be something that, sort of 5 minutes in, we would be at a point 10 minutes in maybe that I've covered like the key points of the game. They've seen it running, it's looking nice, etc., etc. And then depending on, it was more the person rather than the company, if that makes sense. So some people would just sit and want more, and that's cool, and I'd just carry on rambling. I'm good at rambling. And some people would just like interrupt, and that was fine too. But I think everyone gave us that little sort of that introductory bit to kind of settle in. I mean, we had some really interesting stuff. Like probably Devolver's a good example. We're actually, they're very sort of trendy and hot, and they have like a kind of the kind of game you maybe think they want, a portfolio or whatever. And we know them quite well, the guys there, or at least the guys from UK, Andy and Graham. And it's always weird pitching to them because it's like we know they're big dogs, they know they're big dogs, but it's kind of like hi, you again,
And also Graham's awesome. Like he's a really easy person to talk to.
Yeah, exactly. And they're brutally honest, and it's fantastic.
Yeah.
And then maybe at the other end of the spectrum, you'd expect is like the Nintendo second party. So that's literally 7 people. They're typing on their laptops as you're talking. And we met a few people who were like, it's kind of a bit like a job interview. It was a bit formal, a bit weird. We went in, and sure, they were sat there typing, but I engaged them. I was like, well, if this is the thing that's putting people off, I'm going to solve that by like directly engaging with them. If they're able to just sit there, that wouldn't be good. But by the end of that, we'd had a 3/4 of an hour sort of chat about the game. It's way less formal than I'd expect, and again, it's just down to the people, I guess, and maybe the idea. I don't know how much that sort of affects it.
It seems as well that like you need the preparation. You need to know the kind of the incredibly theatrical kind of this, the lecture basically version of this conversation, right? Where you know exactly what you need to say, exactly what you need to show, and then that allows you to play jazz, right? Because you know where you have to hit and what you need to do, but you're set up to then, if you have someone who wants to chat, you can chat. If you've got someone who wants to sit and listen, you can sit and listen, or like you say, like engaging with people, and stand out as well. That's the thing, is like, you're probably more memorable to those people because you made the effort to engage them, right?
Yeah.
In a way that everyone else maybe was a bit intimidated, so people tended to be quieter. They're going to remember that annoying British guy who kept asking them their opinion of everything they were looking at or whatever. Like, and it's I found that just being memorable is so important in those kind of conversations.
Absolutely.
Michael, please don't insult the guests.
Who was I insulting? Oh, Smithy. Okay, he can take it.
We're so British, yeah. Memorable. It's another word for something else, isn't it? No.
It's like a co-op game. It's always fun, even if I'm being mean.
I mean, in a sort of, I guess, in relation to that, and I don't mean to bang on about Nintendo, but it was the one where this is the presentation where we had actual product designers, like games designers from Nintendo, talking to us about our game, and so they were obviously able to ask some really interesting questions. And there came a point halfway through where one of them asked, "So, what do you plan to do about the mechanic whereby essentially we have a boat that you sort of chaperone and sort of chaperones you through the environment." It's like a safe house that keeps moving, and the idea is that you can actually get caught up by the evil that's trying to kill you and overtaken. And what happens then? Like, does it carry on moving? You only ever get overtaken because you have failed to do something. So if you keep failing to do it, the situation gets worse and worse and worse and worse. And he was like, well, how do you see that being developed? Like, what answers have you got around that? And I just said, genuinely, we don't know. That's something that's come out of prototyping it this far. We're aware of it, and I'm glad you brought it up. And we sort of had a bit of a back and forth, designer to designer, almost, about some ideas, and that was really cool because, for me as a designer, I was like, right, cool, I'm having a discussion I can absolutely relate to, but then hopefully just being honest, not being afraid. You're pitching something, of course you don't have all the answers, otherwise you'd just turn up with a blueprint, and frankly it wouldn't be games development. So
those always turn out as such great games as well, the ones with the 300-page GDDs, don't they?
Yeah,
it's something that me and Alexander have talked a lot about, I think, in private, but also on the show, the idea of the prototype as being about asking questions. Ultimately, you're testing hypotheses and you're finding out what works, what doesn't work, and what you didn't even anticipate. So it's good when you show prototypes to people and they understand that that's the context of the thing they're looking at. That it's not a perfect vertical slice. It's actually trying to answer some questions, but also more importantly asking lots of questions.
But I am curious about that because, as you mentioned, the GDD, the game development document,
Sorry, I acronymed again, didn't I? Apologies.
When you go into one of those meetings, I'm sort of curious. Because in your head you're going okay, it's okay that I didn't have the answer to that. I'm genuinely curious. Do you think the person on the other side of the table is okay with that? Do you think they want that answer, whether or not you think you should have that answer?
It's a good question. Again, I'm going to kind of prevaricate a little. It's probably dependent on the person and the company. I think it's an interesting insight into how they'll think. So with Nintendo, from what I know about how they work, second party particularly, they will be more interested in the fact that it's not a surprise to us and that we're trying to think about something. We'll try and solve it, and not having all the answers is actually okay 7 or 8 weeks into it. As long as
you know that there's a valid question, right? That's
yeah. Like my initial reaction wasn't to shocked sit back and kind of spill my water and think, what are you talking about?
Milk.
My milk, yes. But then some of the other companies we spoke to were obviously more sort of interested in, or rather as interested in, kind of the scoping, the team makeup, the amount of time that we think it's going to take, the cost, and that's, these are two-way things. We're pitching for money, and so most people think, well, you're out there to ask them for something, but at the same time you're checking them out. You need to know what they think is a priority, how they think about those things as a priority, and frankly, a lot of these companies, if they didn't ask us about I don't know, competitive products or how they see it fitting in or whatever, then you think, well, hang on, one of the things you should be bringing to this equation is a knowledge of the market that we don't have. So even when maybe you think, oh, I've given the wrong answer, or I may have not given the thing they wanted to hear, that's, as long as you're aware of that, then that's a point that you're like, well, maybe they're not the people for us, maybe they're not the people for this game separately. Those are two different things as well.
Did you feel that happening a lot?
Not too much. I think one of the challenges of the game is that it's kind of weird and a bit unique, but within a familiar framework. So it's like a fantasy city, it's first person, we're not introducing crazy new mechanics or anything, but it's the mix of them that's really different. And every single meeting, without fail, people said, A, it looks really nice for 8 weeks work, and B, I'm not even sure what this is like. This is really unique. And every time we'd say, yeah, we'd laugh it up and just say, well, yeah, it's been a real struggle trying to figure out how to pitch it. The elevator pitch is it's 12 words and they're all really long words. And it's not a useful, there's no pithy, oh, hey, it's Far Cry 2 meets Silent Hill or whatever, something that's immediately exciting. So, so we didn't really see a lot of people kind of, most people covered the kind of where does this fit and what how are you scoping it and how big is this, and because people were just genuinely leaning forward and interested almost from the word go because they hadn't seen anything particularly like it.
It's also a risk of adopting a defensive stance. It's very important when you're talking to people to not just to go back to what you were saying just now, the kind of well, if someone asks a question or if someone points out a problem or is unsure about something, I've often found it that, you lose the room if you get very defensive. If you go, well, it's going to be fine, it's not a problem. When, it's much often I find, taking the, well, yeah, we don't know. It's early days and we need a publisher to help us with that stuff is a valid kind of response. Yeah.
Getting defensive is by far the worst thing you can do.
But you see it happen all the time. Right?
Oh, I can't even express how many times I've seen it happen.
Well, I guess you did as well, especially when you're doing interviews with devs, right? Especially, I guess less so with the media trained AAA guys, but I bet you've had a fair number of indies
I've seen fights.
Defensive.
No, I've been in the room for fights.
Really?
Okay. Screaming matches. Yes.
Oh wow! Okay.
I've absolutely been in product presentations where someone will walk out. I have been in presentations that, most recently, not recently like this year, but last year at E3, I was in a meeting where a dev was showing a bunch of PowerPoint slides, and someone raised their hand and was like, okay, are you going to show any gameplay? And they're like, well, that's not what this meeting is for. It's like, oh, okay. Stands up, walks right out of the room. You can't waste people's time. And that's why I was curious about where Smithy was going when he said, I don't know the answer to that, because I'm curious to know if a publisher turns around, because a publisher is trying to make a marketable decision on whether they should support you financially to get this thing to market and whether they will make a return on that investment. So I was curious to know if you turn around and say, I don't know, if they're okay with that, or if they go, okay, great.
I definitely found when I used to, because that was how I got my start in the industry, was doing pitching, creating pitch materials, basically back when you used to have an 8-person pitch department in a big studio doing this. And I remember one of the very early lessons I learned was leaving space, not necessarily answering everything, because you kind of want the publisher to buy in and want to solve problems. That's a very compelling thing to give someone room, leave some space in the design that they can invent ideas, they can make suggestions, because that's how you get them emotionally invested in the idea. So yeah, it's an interesting grey area. I don't know, Smithy, do you find that? Did you find that people were pitching in with, oh, it'd be so cool if you did this and that kind of stuff?
I think, yes, they were, maybe slightly less so than I've seen in other pitches, because they were still essentially in 15 minutes trying to figure out what is this game? Quite
sure. Okay.
Yeah, which is kind of a good thing. Maybe it's kind of a bad thing. We'll kind of see how that falls out. But at the same time, I think it was certainly, we're not this isn't the pitch meeting. It was just hey, we're at GDC and I'm pitching this game, and as much as we know about it at that time, we've got something really cool to show. But we're not and now we're going to wait for your answer. That's gotcha. Still to come. And maybe this is kind of a way I'd quite like to do it, because it takes that pressure out of that. They're not necessarily thinking, oh, every unanswered question is a cross rather than a tick. But I don't know. We'll see if anyone bites, I suppose.
So, Smithy, when would this become in any way public if it gets past the prototype stage?
Well, we talk about it on Twitter and Facebook quite a lot. All the sort of the development so far. I don't know. I guess it depends with the different publishers. I mean, we always push to be open and public as a playable thing. If we don't land a pitch, I think we'd probably just release it as a, here is what we've done. You know, like maybe someone can learn from it or whatever. What can be achieved in sort of, it'll be 11 or 12 weeks by the end of it. I don't know. There's still a lot of options, you know. So a lot of the people we talked to were publishers, but there were a few investors. There was some kind of, fundraising kind of things, There's Kickstarter's always an opportunity. Maybe, I don't know. It's it's a really weird situation to be in, but hopefully sooner rather than later. I always like to just be able to give things to people that we've made, and like I say, let people learn from it. If we don't learn something, maybe someone else can pick something up from it.
All right, we're going to brush over what's going on at the studio this week because Mike will be doing a lot of that stuff for the next couple weeks, so we'll loop back on that. So we'll go straight into reader mail.
Yo.
Dear Mr. Bithell and
Hello.
Mr. Slewinski.
Oh, I like that. That's a good opening.
Right?
That's the respect we deserve.
My name is Tyler. I found the Bithell Games Podcast recently and have been working my way through the early access episodes and now into the real episodes. I've really been enjoying the podcast, especially the behind-the-scenes look into game development and when you discuss the practical business aspects of the industry. I'm finishing my last semester of law school at the University of Oregon, focusing on trademarks and copyrights, business law, and transactional work. And my goal after graduation is to help members of the games industry, especially small and independent developers and creative small businesses in other industries. With this in mind, I was particularly excited to hear the lawyer and accounting talk in episode 2. Wait until you get to episode 9 with Jess, then you'll be good to go. After hearing the episode, I wanted to reach out for any advice you might have for a soon-to-be lawyer interested in helping game developers. I've heard from others in the games industry that developers are adverse to working with lawyers or, quote, suits, and I can understand that. On the other hand, I've also met some great lawyers working specifically in the games industry. Mm-hmm. So, 2 big questions I have for the 2 of you, or 3 of you. 1, how to overcome that industry adversity to working with lawyers, how to present myself as a lawyer and package the help I can provide as something useful rather than something scary and threatening, and relatedly, how to connect with game developers. And 2, what are specific skills and areas of law that are particularly useful for game developers? What are legal issues that game developers know that they will have, and what are the legal issues that game developers don't know they will have? I have some answers to each of these questions in my head, and you touched on some answers in the second question in the podcast episode, but it would be great to hear more from each of you on this. Any advice, experience, etc., etc. Thank you very much for your time. Look forward to hearing back from you in more episodes of the podcast. Best, Tyler. So let's go back to question number 1, and I want Smithy to actually take first swing at this. How to overcome that industry adversity to working with lawyers, how to present myself as a lawyer and package the help I can provide as something useful rather than something scary.
Okay, the most actionable thing I can think of is to never wear a tie if you're meeting an indie dev, I would say. Just because I feel like that's like a weirdly ingrained societal kind of sign, It seems like a silly thing, but a lot of the devs in indie sort of scene, in the independent scene, are there because of a love for games and a love for like the culture around it and all this kind of thing. And the business is like a necessary evil for a bunch of them, I guess. Hopefully people will learn to come around and appreciate the value that it brings, as I think a lot of people have, myself and Mike certainly included. But yeah, that tie or similar sort of way of presenting yourself is certainly something that kind of just rings alarm bells. I think it's one of those things that is really hard to well, it's easy to sort of underestimate the effect it can have.
Mike, what is your feeling on ties?
I'm going to completely disagree with my learned friend Andrew Smith here.
That's never happened before. What?
It's never happened before. It's the first ever time. No, I say go for it. Like, so my take. So suits is an interesting thing to unpack anyway. Like, that's just a term that's used. I often refer to Alexander as my suit. And I think that's that. For me, it's a term of endearment as much. I think if you're genuinely an indie dev who thinks that business has no place in games.
As Klifsky from Twitter puts it, "Oh, you're Mike Bithell's American."
He did say that to you, didn't he? So I think if you're an indie dev who thinks that business and legal stuff has no place in game development, fair enough. But just I think that's going to be a trickier challenge. I think you're going to go more down the art side. And that's legit and cool and awesome, but it's not how you kind of get to grow a business and grow a studio and all this stuff. I am fine with people with ties. So Jazz is our lawyer, who I love his. He owns the suitiness. He'll show up in I see him at every games event and give him a hug, and he's always in a very, very nice suit, very smart tie. He's a professional, and those cues, yes, for a lot of people. Sorry, the police are on to me here. Those cues are off-putting to some indies, but for me, it's like, no, he's earned it, and that's his style, and I respect. I would much rather he dressed in a way that made him comfortable and was how he wanted to present himself to the world than that he tried to slob down for me. I'm the guy in t-shirt and jeans. That's fine, but I don't expect that from other people who I work with, and to be honest, like I like my lawyer to look like a professional. So no, I have no problem with that. And I think, honestly, like, I would never ask a dev to wear a suit in order to impress a lawyer, so I would never ask a lawyer to wear a t-shirt and jeans in order to impress a dev. Like, we can all get along and be grown-ups. So no, I more ties. If anything, go for the Hitman look. Go wear a nice, like, a red tie. That way, people will think either you're cosplaying or a lawyer, which is cool in either direction. So yeah, that's my take. So I completely disagree with Smithy. The truth, probably, honestly, it shows how subjective the perspective that you're going to come up against is. If you see Smithy may not be that keen on that look. I will be. There is no one answer, I guess, is the takeaway from what we both said. Like, everyone has different approaches.
2, what are the specific skills and areas of law that are particularly useful for game developers? So he's actually, section 2 actually has several questions in it. So let's start
such a lawyer.
Right.
He's got sub clauses in his questions. Awesome.
So section 2, what specifically skills and areas of law that are particularly useful? Contracts. It's all contracts, isn't it? That's the thing. Contract law. If you are blessed to have a client that needs it, then you start getting into trademarks and copyright, and going from there. And
it's fair to say that that's more of a mid-sized to large indie problem, though. I don't think. Yeah. I think a lot of indies. Well, we've talked about it. A lot of indies completely overlook that stuff. But it's contracts, isn't it? It's employees, contracts, and contracts with the platform holders.
Smithy?
Yeah, 100%. I think if you're in a position where you can start to look at licensing your stuff out to toy manufacturers, you're probably doing all right. So yeah, contract is the thing. There's and I think there's probably like maybe 2 broad areas. One is you as a developer working for a publisher for money, and then the other is maybe you hiring other people, so either staff or porting houses or whatever. So there's probably like those broad splits.
Mm.
So what are the legal issues that game developers know they'll have, or more particularly, what are the issues that game developers don't know they will have?
I know I was surprised by the stuff that happened as I started to scale. So things like, forming a business partnership, for example, is something that I must admit when I was making Thomas Was Alone, it didn't occur to me that I would ever need to worry about all that stuff. So that's something that fortunately my lawyer is on the case with and knows how to do.
Actually, Smithy, you just went through that.
Yeah.
So what was that process like?
Do excuse me.
That bad, eh?
It was, well, we have the same lawyer, which is hilarious. Big up Jazz. Yeah, it was nice and easy, honestly. It wasn't something I was expecting, although we'd had, back in the mists of time, we'd had some issues where essentially making a game with someone and then the contract not covering like the rights to the work on it and how that game and the money from it should properly be exploited beyond that initial project kind of caused some mess. So we've always been quite proactive, if you like, on contracts.
Oh, actually, that's an important one right there. Smithy just brought up an important one, that the division of the work and the ownership of the work, especially if you're, for example, if you're a student and you're in school, I cannot speak to UK law, but several American schools own the work that you create while you're in school, which
it's a little softer here. It's a share, but yes, there is definitely. I've had some students come to me who've had great successes with games they started in uni, and then the schools called them up and gone, "Hey, we own that." Yeah, it happens.
And I think that's part of a much larger topic that I have.
It's not a problem we're going to solve on this show, is it?
No. But I certainly have opinions on that topic. But yeah, so Smithy, you worked through ownership rights, and so now you're also starting to scale a bit, right? Because if you land a deal, then you're going to have to do some hiring and such stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. So we've now got technically 2 directors and a non-executive director, and yeah, the second director came on quite around Tango's launch last year, and yeah, hopefully, I mean much like Mike, we work a lot with contractors, and that's a very simple thing. You can have kind of like a template document for that, but then, yeah, like employment of people is wildly different. There's all kinds of lovely things like pensions and healthcare and things like that. But yeah, it's. I think me and Mike have always been fairly mindful of making a business out of what we do as well. So I mean, and hopefully that's what most people will end up doing because they're successful enough, but yeah, it's good to keep an eye out on these things.
I'll sort of end this reader mail by saying that yes, there are plenty of games focused lawyers in the industry, and get to know them. Follow them on Twitter.
A lot of them are hiring, right? That's the thing. A lot of great opportunities to learn on someone else's stuff.
Yeah, follow them on Reddit. Get to know them because they are very accessible. If you end up going to something like GDC, yeah, you can hang out with them. Just be cool. Just be cool. But
compliment their suit.
I don't even think they were wearing suits. One of them always walks around in a suit. But yeah, get to know those folks because they are approachable. Very much like the rest of this industry. They're approachable. Just get to know them. Get to know what business they need, and again, as they scale up, they're dealing with bigger and bigger things, so they might not be able to focus on the day-to-day contract stuff. So that's a really great in for you if you're starting out and doing all that stuff. If you have a burning question about games, game development, or just about the complexities of the universe, you can send those questions to us via contact@BithelGames.com. That's contact@BithelGames.com, or through the YouTube comments of this show, or on Twitter by pinging at Mike Bithell, at Slewinski, or Smithy.
At Spilt Milk Studio.
SPILTMILK Studio. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Bithell Games Podcast. We can always use your support, so please provide reviews and 5 stars on iTunes, likes and subscribes on YouTube, and positive reinforcement on whatever other platforms you're hearing this show on whenever possible. This podcast was produced by Jonathan Dannon. We will be back next week. I'm Alexander Slewinski. Thanks again, and get in the last word, Mike.
Confidential.